It's Thursday, July 3rd, 2025. Welcome to Make It Make Sense. I'm Granthermes. Today on the show, Trump is getting his big, beautiful bill. After a lot of back and forth, and at one point where it looked like Republicans in the House were going to have to rewrite the entire thing, the holdouts caved, and the House is now on the edge of passing Trump's signature bill, if it hasn't already passed by the time you're listening to this. If you want to know what's in the bill, go back and listen to Tuesday's episode. I'll do a little refresher here in a minute, but it won't be a deep dive. What I'm going to talk about today, though, is what happens next, because there are some pretty immediate consequences for real people and politicians, some future consequences, and then some consequences it seems that Trump might try to avoid. But before we get to that, please make sure that you're following or subscribe to the show, whatever podcast app you listen to it on, like and subscribe on YouTube, and sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack. It is just $5 a month. I have got articles and content going up there all the time. And as always, share the show on social media. It's Mims Newspod. That's MIMS Newspod, all one word on every platform. I am at Granthermes on Twitter and Bluesky, and at Granthermes TV on everything else. All right, let's get to the show. Hey, listener, you know what the show is all about breaking down the news in a way that actually makes sense. No spin, just real reporting and smart conversations. And as an audience, you're sharp, curious, and engaged, and I know that you value where you spend your time and money. So if you're a brand, an organization, or a cause that aligns with truth, trust, and just cutting through the noise, then we want to partner with you. Whether you're launching a new product, pushing a policy, or you just want to get your message in front of an audience that values insight over outrage, let's make it make sense together. For ad rates, sponsorship packages, and custom campaigns, you can email ads@matchbookmediapod.com. That's ads@matchbookmediapod.com. Because the smartest conversations deserve the smartest partners. Okay, let's get on with the show. So as I'm recording this, Democratic Minority Leader, New York Representative Hakeem Jeffries has just broken the record for the longest time speaking on the House floor, which used to be 8 hours and 31 minutes. That was set by former Minority Leader turned Speaker of the House turned ousted Republican Kevin McCarthy, when he gave a marathon speech back in 2021 opposing another triple B bill, which was Joe Biden's Build Back Better bill. Now, for what it's worth, I don't think that the goal of the big, beautiful bill, what we're talking about right now, was meant to be a triple B bill so that it could undermine Biden's legacy. I'm sure it didn't hurt the idea for Trump and Republicans to call it this, but it's really more born out of the fact that Trump likes to talk this way. He likes alliteration. He likes things that are big and beautiful. He says it all the time, and it's just what Trump said on social media. Now, what Jeffries did here is not a filibuster. That's not a thing in the House. In the House, members of Congress who are in leadership are allowed to talk past their 1 minute allotted time in the certain rules they're in right now. It's called the Magic Minute Rule. I didn't make it up. These things have dumb names. But here is a bit of that speech.
Extraordinary to me, Mr. Speaker, that you got folks in this town talking about draining the swamp. Guess what? You are the swamp. You are the swamp. You are the swamp. We've never seen anything like this. The type of corruption that has been unleashed on the American people and has poisoned, Mr. Speaker, this bill.
And there was a lot of that over the almost 9 hours that Jeffries talked. But the reason he did this is because as soon as he's done, the House is going to vote and pass the bill, if it hasn't already passed by the time you're listening to this. Now, just last night, it didn't look like that it was going to go this way, because after the Senate passed the bill on Tuesday, there were a lot of members in the House who were unhappy with changes that senators made to their bill that they'd sent over. Because remember, spending bills like this one have to start in the House under the Constitution, and then they go back to the Senate, where there are changes, and then things go back and forth until an agreement is made, or at least that's how it works in theory. Usually now, in our modern era, the Senate and the House and their leadership have sort of talked to each other about what their priorities are, especially when one party controls both chambers of Congress, both the House and the Senate, like Republicans do right now. You don't want it to look like the party can't agree with itself and, can't get its stuff together. That's why it's such a big deal that depending on the time of the night yesterday, there were anywhere between 10 and 14 Republicans who said they were not going to vote for Trump's big, beautiful bill. The holdouts were there because the bill raises the national debt by $5 trillion. Some of them were upset about certain tax moves that would change state and local taxes and timelines and caps to those. Some were upset by cuts to Medicaid or food stamps, but because they weren't deep enough, even though that's more than $1 trillion that'll be cut from Medicaid, which will kick off between 14 and 17 million people from their health care coverage. And then on top of that, with the cuts to SNAP or food stamps and Medicaid, it'll force somewhere on the order of 38 million children to lose access to healthy food. But the objection there was that this didn't go far enough. Like I said before, if you want a deeper dive on what this bill does and the big things that are in it, go back and listen to Tuesday's episode if you missed it, or if you just want a quick refresher on that. But the point here is that if Republicans couldn't get 10 members to change their minds, they were in real trouble. Because right now, Republicans only have a 2-person majority in the Senate. While they do hold 220 seats and the Democrats only have 213, I know I wasn't a math major, but 7 is not 2. A majority in the House is 218 votes, so Republicans can only lose 2 people before they need to start making concessions with either their own members or with Democrats across the aisle. And that's what Speaker of the House Mike Johnson did all day yesterday. He kept open a procedural vote for hours, which is not the norm, and while not against the rules technically per se, it's just not something you do if you're acting in good faith. But while that vote was open, Johnson was wheeling and dealing with these holdout members, and it worked. Now, we don't know what the deals were yet, but I'm sure we will soon. And when this thing passes, what it means is that Trump is going to get his 4th of July bill signing ceremony, which is why he wanted this passed by the 4th. He wants the spectacle. In fact, Johnson said as much to reporters just this morning, saying, quote, "I talked to the president about an hour ago about a signing ceremony, and they're working on that. We'll do that on July 4th, maybe right before the B-2s fly." B-2 bombers, he means. I mean, you just can't script this any better, so we're excited. Which should be a reinforcing thing, at least as a part of a way to understand how Donald Trump operates. There's always at least some component of his thinking, if not often a large component, of how will this look as a show? How will it look on TV? How will it look as specifically reality TV? It's among Trump's greatest instincts and strongest talents, frankly, as a politician, to know these things and to be good at these things. It's how he got elected, frankly. So Trump signs this bill tomorrow. That isn't the end of it, though, because apparently in meetings with members of Congress as late as yesterday, Trump has continued to tell them not to touch Medicaid. And remember, $1.1 trillion will be cut from Medicaid under this bill. It was a promise that he made on the campaign trail that he wouldn't be touching Medicaid, Medicare, or Social Security. He, quote-unquote, warned members not to make these cuts, but still wants massive tax cuts for the super wealthy and an increase in defense and immigration spending. So the issue is here that Trump seems not to want to believe that in order to get what he wants, which is those tax cuts, he has to cut Medicaid. When he repeated that he didn't want Medicaid to be touched, a member of Congress in one of those meetings actually had to say, but we are touching Medicaid in this bill. And as reporting from the outlet Notice, or News of the United States, which is a new outlet, but they're very, very good. You should check them out. They put it this way, that Trump, quote, still doesn't seem to have a firm grasp about what his signature legislative achievement does. Except for maybe the tax cuts, because the tax cuts, like I said in Tuesday's episode, transfer a lot of money from the poorest Americans and middle-class Americans to the wealthiest Americans. Under this tax plan, people making below $51,000 a year will end up paying after taxes somewhere between $1,000 and $700 from their actual income. And that's a lot of money when you make $51,000 or less. The people who make more than $1 million a year to more than $4.3 million a year, so the 0.1 to the 0.01% of the American population, will get somewhere between $44,000 a year and $400,000 a year more in their income because of this. It is basically poor people paying rich people to stay rich. And Trump likes that because he's on the winning end of that bargain. But he doesn't seem to understand kind of anything else in this bill, which means the big question now is what happens next. And that comes in two parts. First, it's how the bill literally gets enacted, how it literally works. So the tax stuff, the stuff that, like I said, Trump likes, will go into effect this year in 2025. But the cuts to pay for those things, like Medicaid, work requirements, and changes to health insurance coverage, they don't kick in until after the midterm elections in 2026, when people would feel the real brunt of these things and Republicans would pay the price for that because people would be feeling those things. And then the big one, the massive funding changes to Medicaid and food stamps, well, those don't start until 2028, when Trump will no longer be allowed to run for president, or at least under the law as it's understood right now. And the Republican running will be able to say that if these cuts don't get made, then we'll be up a creek without a paddle, because we've already spent the money that these cuts provided for on the tax cuts that happened back in 2025. So essentially they're robbing the future to pay for the present, but not for everybody. And now this bill, because of all these things, is wildly unpopular. Between 42% and 64% of all Americans dislike this bill, according to 5 different polls that were done last month from 5 different firms across the political spectrum. And normally, that kind of polling would be something that would give members of Congress pause or would, frankly, force them to pull back. But that's not what happened here or is happening, because we just don't live in normal times anymore. So what Republicans are resigning themselves to doing here is to having to sell the bill and the outcomes of this thing to the American people after it becomes law. It's something that Democrats did with the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. They're the same thing, which did not work, at least not right away. Now, the ACA didn't become popular. It is popular right now, but it didn't become popular until years down the line. And that was giving people health care, not taking it away, which means Republicans have an uphill battle to sell this big, beautiful bill to people. It's also a much, much harder way to do this. So the question is, why do this at all then? Well, a couple of reasons. First, simply they're afraid of Donald Trump. I wrote about this on the Make It Make Sense Substack on Wednesday this week, but Republicans are stuck right now between fear of Donald Trump and fear of Elon Musk, who spent the last couple of weeks promising to pay for primary challengers for members who vote for this bill. And while he may actually do that, it would seem right now that Republicans are much more afraid of Donald Trump. And there are good reasons for that. First, Trump has incredible power within the party still. And even if he isn't president again in 2028, which he cannot be under the law, I would need to stress that right now, but he still will be the beating heart and soul of the party. It is his party. His family, his daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, runs the Republican National Committee, the entire party, which means Trump holds the purse strings of the party and could damage any future campaign or could run primary challengers to members who didn't do what he wanted. The second thing, and there's a lot to be said for this, is that members are concerned about their safety, their physical safety. Trump sent a mob of supporters to attack the Capitol in 2021 after he lost the election in 2020, and many of the same people who are in Congress today were there when that happened, and a lot of them have been vocal about being afraid of Trump's supporters and, by extension, their own voters. So it's not just that they're afraid of losing their seats, but they're also afraid of their safety to a large part. Now, the second reason that they'd go along with this uphill battle of having to sell this bill after it's done is because of that thing I talked about a bit ago, that Trump doesn't seem to understand this bill, and they're hoping that after he signs this into law, that he uses his power of executive orders, which he has not been shy about since he came back into office, and they're hoping that he uses executive orders to change or undo parts of this law, which he really can't do. But here's Representative Ralph Norman talking about that idea this morning on CNBC. And I'm going to let this play out here. It's about a minute long, but it is something to hear.
It sounds to me in some way that you are saying that the president persuaded you by saying that he is going to some degree, override some of the provisions in the bill. Is that right?
No, he's not going to override it. He's going to on the permitting, he's going to drive a hard bargain on the permitting. He's going to have accountability is the best way to describe it. And he assured us he was going to do that. And I think some executive orders you'll see come down the pipe, which will be good.
But also remove subsidies on wind and solar, correct? The ones that are currently in the bill.
No, he didn't. He can't remove them. He's just those that, they had timelines for these, and we couldn't alter that. The Senate actually made it longer. So what he's going to do is use his powers as chief executive to make sure that the companies that apply for solar credits, as an example, he's going to make sure that they're doing what they say, and when they say they've started construction, he's going to make sure they've done that.
Right. Congressman, I want to thank you for joining us.
So that's not, a strong explanation here. Norman is talking about certain subsidies ending, but if Trump promised one holdout member that he would do this kind of thing, he very likely made similar promises to other members as well, which means that there's a better than good chance that Republicans are hoping there's a way for Trump to bail them out by signing and issuing executive orders which aren't laws. And like I just said, a president can't rewrite a law from his desk. That's not how this works. But it does seem to be what they're hoping for, and they're hoping will happen. But it's also worth saying, too, that so far during this presidency, Republicans in Congress have not cared about Trump overstepping his bounds when it comes to presidential authority into places in which Congress has to give up power for him to do that. The courts have not been against Donald Trump using the office and his executive orders powers to trample on certain things that are in the Constitution. And so they likely have a point in believing in some of this. But I think it's really important to say that in a bill full of cuts to taxes for the rich, cuts to food stamps, to Medicaid, to college endowments, to clean energy, Republicans in Congress are voting here to cut something else. And it's more of their own power, to give more of that over to the president. And that is just a piece of this bill that should not be ignored. Okay, that is it for today's episode. Please rate and review the show on whatever podcast app you're listening to this on. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications on YouTube. Sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack, where I've got articles going up all the time. It is just $5 a month to get access to those things. And as always, share the show on social media. It's Mims Newspod. That's MIMS Newspod, all one word on every platform. I am at Granthermes on Twitter and Bluesky, and at Granthermes TV on everything else. And just a bit of a programming note, no show tomorrow for the 4th of July. I'll be taking the holiday off and the weekend off. I hope you have a nice weekend as well. Hopefully it's sunny and summer-like wherever you are, and happy Independence Day. I'm Granthermes, and I'll talk to you next week.